This story this time is about my great Aunt Lillie, or grand aunt, depending on how you want to say it. Her name was Lillie Mildred Doss, and she was my Mama Jessie's older sister. Mama Jessie was the youngest of 8, and Aunt Lillie was number 2 of those 8 children. I never knew her. She died before I was born. She actually died July 25th, 1937 in Waterford, Oakland County, Michigan. She'd been born November 16th, 1881 in Clay in Webster County, Kentucky. She was the daughter of George Samuel Doss and Nancy Lugina Woosley. In 1902, she got married to Leonard Worsham, and they had 3 children, Lena Marguerite, Frida Agnes, and Leonard Dale. Well, in 1919, on September 11th, Leonard, who was working in the coal mine, was killed in an accident in the mine. He was working for the O'Gara Coal Company and was in the Salina Gas and Coal Mine just outside of Harrisburg, Illinois. Another man named Herman Ladd was also killed that day. This left Aunt Lillie with 3 young children. Leonard Dale was just a small baby at the time his dad died. Now, I'm telling this story because I just had a new granddaughter in June who they named Lily Alice. Aunt Lillie, they didn't name her for Aunt Lillie, but I told my son-in-law later that I had a great aunt named Lily, and her oldest sister was named Lena Alice, and my new granddaughter's name is Lily Alice. So I thought it was kind of cool that those 2 family names have gotten used. Anyway, there's a really cool story about Lily. Well, her family descendants were always told that she'd gotten sick and had cut her arm somehow, and it got gangrene, and it had to be amputated. And that's the story they'd always heard. Well, my dad's oldest brother, my Uncle William Teague, he had always heard that she'd been in a honky tonk and her arm had gotten shot off. Well, that was a cool story. And then I was asking my Uncle George, my daddy's another older brother of my dad, my Uncle George Beard, and I says, "Did you ever meet Aunt Lillie?" He says, "Yeah, I met her a couple of times." And he goes, "I remember I was probably about 8 or 9 years old, and she didn't have an arm. And so I asked her, I says, 'Aunt Lillie, what happened to your arm?' And she told him, she says, 'A jealous lover shot it off.'" Well, that was even a cooler story, I thought, than getting shot in a honky tonk. Anyway, I didn't know exactly how. And like I say, her family, her descendants, had said she'd gotten sick, their arm had been cut somehow and got gangrene, it had to be cut off. So 3 different stories. Was it gangrene? Was it a honky tonk? Was it a jealous lover? Well, a few years ago, I think it was in 2013, my cousin Cindy, my Uncle Don Beard's daughter, she had been at Mama Jessie's house when they were going through and cleaning things out after she passed, and she found a bunch of old letters. And so she's been randomly scanning these old letters and sending them to me, which I think is pretty cool. Anyway, 2013, so it's been 7 years ago now, she sent me a bunch of old letters, and I'm reading through these old letters, and there's a letter dated February 8th, or not February 8th, February 12th, 1931. And Aunt Annie, Mama Jessie's, another sister of Mama Jessie's, who was living up in Cleveland, Ohio at the time, is writing to Mama Jessie. And she says, "I don't know if Lily's told you yet or not, but she's in the hospital, and it's bad. Don't tell Mama, it'll just break her heart." And then she goes on to tell what happened to Aunt Lillie. Aunt Lillie had been living in a boarding house, and her son Leonard was living there with her. He was just a young boy. Her 2 older girls, I think one was already married and the other one was at school somewhere. Anyway, it's just her and Leonard living here at this boarding house. And a friend of theirs from Illinois had come to visit, had stopped by to visit, Mr. Russell. Can't remember if the first name was mentioned or not. But his wife and kids lived down in Illinois where she had lived before she moved up to Michigan. Anyway, he was there visiting. Apparently another man that Aunt Lillie had been dating named Joe Williams happened by. And he stops and he talks to him and seems perfectly fine, and then he leaves because she's already talking to Mr. Russell here. So Annie's telling this in this letter. Apparently Joe Williams was the jealous type. The jealous lover. No honky tonks, no gangrene. A jealous lover came back with a 30-30 pistol. 30-30 pistol. They're not pistols. They're shotguns. 30-30 shotgun. And aimed it right at her heart. And Mr. Russell jumped up and knocked the gun enough to where it just hit Aunt Lillie in the arm. Needless to say, she ended up getting her arm amputated. And Aunt Annie's telling Mama Jessie in the letter, whatever you do, don't tell Mama. It'll just take her down. It's just awful. Now, if you see Verlie, that was another sister. Now, if you see Verlie, you tell her, don't tell Mama. Because I wrote to her too. Now, that's a pretty cool story. And now we know, as Paul Harvey used to say, and now there's the rest of the story. But Aunt Lillie was a pretty lady. Let me see if I can zoom in here. And you can see some pictures of Aunt Lillie. The one in the middle is when she's younger. Zoom in just a little bit more. She's younger right there. Then let's go back out. And here she is. That is her with her husband Leonard and their two daughters, Lena and Frida. Leonard Jr. hadn't been born yet. There's Aunt Lillie. Wasn't she pretty? And then I've always thought this was a cool picture. There's Uncle Leonard with his son Leonard sitting on the cow. I'm assuming this picture was probably taken just a few months before he was killed in the mines. Then there's Aunt Lillie again. As I say, she was a very pretty woman. And there's another one of Aunt Lillie there as well. Zoom back out here just a little bit. Anyway, Aunt Lillie. It wasn't gangrene. It wasn't a honky tonk. It was a jealous lover. She told Uncle George the truth. But Uncle George said he never forgot seeing her and having that arm off of there. What else can I tell you about Aunt Lillie? She stayed up in Michigan. She would come back to Kentucky ever so often, but she died up there in Michigan, in Waterford, Michigan. I'm in contact now with some of her daughter's descendants. She had the two girls. I haven't run across any of Leonard's descendants yet, but I'm in contact with a couple of descendants of Lena and Frida's. So that's been kind of fun, and I sent them copies of the letter and the newspaper article about the shooting. Now, Mr. Russell was so upset when Joe Williams shot at Aunt Lillie that he beat him up pretty good. So they put Mr. Russell in jail while they were figuring out what had happened. I haven't run across any newspaper articles yet to see what happened, but I'm assuming Joe Williams would have gone to jail, but he got beat up pretty bad, so he was in the same hospital Aunt Lillie was in. So I still need to do some digging to find out what happened to Joe Williams, and hopefully Mr. Russell didn't get into too much trouble and just had to stay overnight in jail while they figured out what was going on and what had happened. But Aunt Annie called it a jealous lover. Shot her arm right off, aimed at her heart. Okay, Kyler, there's your other story about Aunt Lillie. I hope you enjoy it.